In JavaScript, blocks are chunks of code within curly brackets. Scope is all the blocks that can access a variable, constant, function, or class, and hoisting is a weird feature of JavaScript that moves certain parts of our code around. We start with blocks. Every time you see curly brackets that contain code, that's a block. When we declare functions, the thing between curly brackets is a block. If statements have a block, for loops have a block, while loops have a block, and so on. All the code we write in a JavaScript file is wrapped inside of a hidden block. We can write curly braces if we want, but they are not necessary here. The important thing to know is that every line of code in JavaScript is always inside of a block. Blocks can contain other blocks. For example, here we have a function block and it contains an if block. Blocks are essential to understand scope. In JavaScript, every time we say const something, let something, var something, function something, or class something, we say that we are declaring something. If we say const color, we are declaring a constant called color. And if we say function test, we are declaring a function called test. Every time we declare something, the scope of the declaration is all the blocks in the code where we can use the declaration. For example, in this code here, we can use color inside of this block, but we cannot use color inside of this block above. So this block is part of the scope of color, and this block is not part of the scope of color. Before I show you how to discover all the blocks that are part of the scope of a declaration, there is an extremely important feature of JavaScript that we must take a look at. It's called hoisting. Whenever we say var or function, JavaScript will move the declaration to the top of the closest function block or to the top of the outermost block if the declaration is not part of any function. For example, in this code, JavaScript will take our var declaration and it will move it up here to the top of the function that contains the declaration. In this other code snippet, the function declaration is not part of any other function, so JavaScript will move it here at the top of the outermost block. I know it's a bit weird, but this is just how JavaScript works. And this is actually why I advise you to never use var. JavaScript and Python are the only two programming languages that support hoisting, and since hoisting is just extra complexity that we have to deal with, it's just better to avoid it whenever we can. Now that we have seen hoisting, let me show you how we find the scope of a declaration. Remember, scope is all the blocks that have access to a declaration, and in the case of vars and functions, remember also that JavaScript moves them, so the scope might be different from what we see in a text editor because the declaration could have been moved up. Imagine we have this code and we want to find the scope of color. First, we have the block that contains the declaration of color, and we ignore any other block that is not inside of this block. Then, we have all the blocks that are below the declaration, and finally, we have all the function blocks, and be careful because it's only the function blocks that are written before the declaration. The if block above color is not a function block, and so it is not part of the scope of color. These are all the blocks that can access color, and no other block will ever know about the existence of our constant called color. Now, I said that function blocks are special because they have access to all declarations in the outer block, regardless of whether they come before or after the declaration. To understand why, we must take a look at the concept of closures and the execution context. These two concepts are extremely important in JavaScript, so I highly recommend you to watch this video I made where I will show you exactly what closures are and how an execution context works. Leave a like if you learned something. I'm Jay. Bye!